I stood in my brother's glossy office holding a warm catering bag that smelled like pasta and garlic bread. The walls gleamed like glass, and every inch of the place screamed success. Evan leaned back in his leather chair, laughing with his coworkers like he was the king of something. Then he pointed at me and said, "That's my sister. She couldn't even finish college. Now she delivers food for a living." The laughter was instant. It filled the room, loud and cruel, bouncing off the glass walls. My face burned. I wanted to drop the food and run, but my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I walked forward slowly, my fingers shaking around the bag. I placed it carefully on his desk. "Enjoy your lunch," I said quietly, meeting his smug smile. Evan tilted his head. "No tip jar today?" His friends laughed again, louder this time. The sound was sharp enough to cut. Something inside me cracked, but I didn't let him see it. I stepped closer, looked him straight in the eyes, and whispered, "You'll eat those words one day, Evan." His smile faltered for just a second, and I turned and walked out before my voice could shake. Outside, the city felt too bright. Cars honked. People hurried past. But all I could hear were his words replaying again and again, "Worth nothing." That phrase stuck to me like glue. Every step I took home felt heavier, every memory of him as my big brother turned bitter. He used to protect me. Now, he was the one who broke me in front of strangers. I didn't know how, but something deep inside whispered, one day, he'd understand my worth. The drive home was a blur of flashing lights, noise, and anger. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I couldn't stop hearing Evan's voice echoing in my head, "Worth nothing." That single phrase hit harder than any punch. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was silence. When I pulled into my apartment, the smell of stale coffee and cold takeout hit me. I threw my jacket on the couch and paced the room, trying to calm down. Every corner of that tiny space reminded me of what I'd sacrificed. Years ago, I had dreams, big ones. I wanted to finish school, design software, and build something real. But then Mom got sick. Evan said he'd handle the money if I took care of her. I agreed because that's what family does. Except when she died, he disappeared into his fancy new office, and I was left behind with nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I opened Mom's old storage box. The paper smelled faintly like her perfume, lavender and soap. I flipped through bills, medical records, and old family photos. Then I found a sealed envelope with my name written in her careful handwriting, "Confidential, to be given to Lena." I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a document, her will. My eyes scanned the lines until they froze on one thing, Evan's name, scratched out in black ink. Beside it, my name appeared, underlined twice. A chill ran through me. I sat down, holding that piece of paper like it might vanish. What had Evan done? The anger that had cooled earlier reignited, sharper this time. Maybe I didn't have answers yet, but something told me Mom had left me more than memories. She had left me truth. By morning, my decision was made. I needed answers. I drove across town to Mr. Holden's law office, the man who had handled Mom's estate. The building was old, with the smell of paper and dust. He looked surprised when I walked in holding the envelope. "Lena," he said softly, pushing up his glasses. "I wondered when you might come." I handed him the will and pointed at the scratched-out section. Why was Evan's name removed? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Your mother wanted to leave you her shares in a small logistics startup. But after she passed, your brother told me you weren't interested. He claimed you'd said you didn't want anything tied to the business." My breath caught. "That's not true." "I know," he said. "But he had legal power of attorney at the time. He signed everything." "What company?" I asked, my voice tight. He hesitated. "Carter Dynamics." My heart stopped. Carter Dynamics, Evan's company. The one he bragged about on every magazine cover. Mr. Holden lowered his voice. "Those shares are now worth millions, Lena. Maybe more." I sat there frozen. My brother hadn't just humiliated me. He'd stolen from me, from Mom's memory. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. He looked guilty. Evan said it was your wish. I had no reason to doubt him. Outside, the world felt different. The sun didn't shine the same. The cars looked meaner. I gripped the wheel so tightly it wrinkled. Evan had taken my future and buried it under lies. But now, I had a piece of proof, and proof could start wars. He wanted power. I wanted justice. I couldn't focus on anything after that meeting. My thoughts ran wild. I kept seeing Evan's smug grin, hearing the laughter from his office. Every second made my stomach twist tighter. I went online and searched for Carter Dynamics. The company's official website was a shrine to Evan's success, visionary leader, self-made genius, pioneer in logistics software. I almost laughed. None of it mentioned Mom. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the company's patent listings, there was a familiar name. The first registered design for their core system listed Margaret Hale Carter, my mother. Her name. Not his. My heart raced. Evan hadn't just stolen money. He'd built his empire on Mom's work. I opened her old laptop, the one she used before she passed. It was slow, dusty, and full of files I'd never understood. Folder after folder labeled prototype, system, deliverable beta. Then I found one that stood out, CD prototype. I clicked it, but it was password protected. I tried everything I could think of, birthdays, dates, words she loved. Nothing worked. I sat back, staring at the dim screen, my reflection blending with hers in an old family photo on the desk. What had she hidden here? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. If I could open that file, I might find everything Evan had stolen, and proof that he'd taken her invention as his own. I whispered to the empty room, "You think I'm worth nothing? Let's see what Mom thought." The idea of revenge scared me, but justice? Justice felt right. I didn't waste time. I called Jay, my closest friend from school. He worked in IT security, smart, quiet, and someone I trusted completely. "Can you unlock something for me?" I asked. When he came over, I showed him Mom's laptop. "These files are locked," I explained. "They could prove Evan stole everything." Jay whistled softly. "That's a big accusation." "Just look," I said. He hooked up his system, typing lines of code faster than I could follow. After an hour, the lock screen vanished, replaced by a list of files. We both leaned closer. The folder contained documents labeled CD Prototype 1 to 4 and one final file called Master Design. Jay opened it carefully. Blueprints, algorithms, handwritten notes, all in Mom's style. And there, at the bottom, were timestamps dated just weeks before her death. Jay scrolled further, frowning. "These match Carter Dynamics' internal system. It's the same framework." My heart thudded. "You mean?" He nodded. "Evan used your mother's design as his own. This is the original. The proof." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The pages glowed in the screen's light like ghosts whispering the truth. Jay looked up. "What are you going to do with it?" I didn't have an answer. Selling it would make me rich, but it wouldn't feel right. I wanted something more. "I'll make him confess," I said slowly. "But not with lawyers. With his own company." Jay raised an eyebrow. "How?" I smiled faintly. "He once said I was a delivery girl. Maybe I'll deliver something that will change his life." And right then, the plan began to form, simple, bold, unstoppable. I spent the whole night reading through every file we'd unlocked. My eyes burned, but I couldn't stop. Each document told the same story. Mom had written the code that built Carter Dynamics, and Evan had quietly changed it after her death. The metadata didn't lie. Every edit was timestamped. The last ones were made weeks after she was gone, and the user ID read Carter. Jay sat beside me, scrolling through the data with wide eyes. He didn't just copy it, he said. He re-registered the patent under his own name. That's fraud, Lena. If this ever goes public, he's finished. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He used her death to steal everything she built. Jay nodded slowly. You've got the proof. Proof. That word echoed in my head. It felt heavy, too heavy to hold alone. I thought about walking into his office and throwing the evidence in his face, but that wouldn't fix what he'd done. I wanted something that would last. Something that would make the truth stick forever. By sunrise, I shut the laptop and whispered to myself, he thinks I'm worth nothing. Let's see what happens when nothing fights back. The morning light came through my blinds, turning the room gold. I watched the dust dance in it, thinking about Mom. She always said truth had a way of finding its way home. Now, I was going to deliver it there, right into his office. For days, I couldn't think about anything else. Jay said I could sell the files, maybe leak them to the media. But that didn't feel right. I didn't want to profit from my mother's work. I wanted Evan to see what he'd done, and for everyone else to see it too. That's when the idea came to me. It started small, like a spark in the dark. What if I created a delivery company, just like the one that had made him laugh at me, and used it to walk straight into his empire? I told Jay my plan over coffee. He blinked. You want to go undercover? Inside Carter Dynamics? I nodded. As a courier. He'll never recognize me if I hide my face. I'll get access to the office. Files. Maybe even his presentations. He leaned back, whistling. That's risky. Brilliant, but risky. We stayed up late building it. We designed a fake website, created business documents, and registered a shell name, Parcel One Logistics. It looked professional, clean, real, and impossible to trace back to me. We even printed a few mock uniforms. Jay said, "You really think this will work?" I smiled, though my stomach twisted. He once said I was just a delivery girl. I'm going to make him choke on those words. The next day, I submitted a partnership proposal to Carter Dynamics under Parcel One's name. Then I waited. It only took 2 days. The email arrived while I was making breakfast. Subject line, vendor contract approved, Carter Dynamics Logistics Department. I stared at it, barely breathing. It was signed by Evan himself. He hadn't even realized who owned the company he just approved. I laughed, not out of joy, but disbelief. He'd just opened the door and invited me in. Jay came over with a camera and helped me take an ID photo for my badge. You're officially a delivery partner, he said, smirking. On my first day, I wore the uniform, cap pulled low, sunglasses on, mask up. I looked like any other courier. When I walked through those glass doors again, it felt strange. The same lobby where I'd been humiliated now greeted me with polite smiles. Parcel One delivery, I told the front desk. They waved me through without question. Every trip I made inside gave me more than just access. I learned where Evan's office files were stored, how the company's internal network worked, and which doors required clearance. I carried boxes, packages, and coffee trays, all while memorizing everything. Once, Evan passed by me in the hallway. My heart froze. He didn't even look twice. It was like I was invisible. And for the first time, that felt powerful. Each delivery was one step closer to justice. Within a week, I knew the building better than half the employees. I had memorized door codes, schedules, and even the timing of Evan's meetings. I was careful, polite, quiet, invisible. That was the key. The staff gossiped near the break room, and I listened. They talked about the big merger deal, a billion-dollar partnership that would make Carter Dynamics one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. Evan would become a legend. But there was one detail that made my pulse quicken. The entire merger depended on proving that Carter Dynamics owned the logistics software. The same software Mom had created. If I exposed the truth at the right moment, it wouldn't just hurt him, it would collapse everything. Jay helped me upgrade my scanner. It'll copy data every time you check in a package, he said. Invoices, contracts, internal files, all of it. By the end of the week, I had gigabytes of proof sitting on my hard drive. Late one night, while reviewing the files, I found something buried deep, a presentation draft titled Merger Launch Event. It included the line, "Reaffirm Carter Dynamics' ownership of proprietary software." My stomach turned. Evan was about to lie to the entire world on live television. That's when I knew. The truth wouldn't just be revealed, it would be delivered. I spent the next 3 nights building my final weapon. Jay called it the package. It was sleek, a silver box about the size of a shoebox. Inside was a flash drive connected to an automatic upload trigger. When opened, it would instantly sync Mom's original files, her name, and every timestamp document straight into Carter Dynamics' entire cloud system. There would be no stopping it. When it uploads, it'll be permanent, Jay warned. Every investor, every employee, everyone will see it. That's the point, I said quietly. We tested it twice on a dummy system. It worked perfectly. The moment the lid lifted, the data spread everywhere like wildfire. I printed the Carter Dynamics logo on the lid and sealed it with tape. It looked official, harmless, even beautiful. Jay looked at me seriously. Are you sure, Lena? Once this goes live, there's no going back. I thought about Evan's words again, about Mom's name erased from history. I'm sure, I said. He made me deliver food. Now I'll deliver the truth. When I set the box on my table that night, I felt strangely calm. The hum of the city outside sounded like a countdown. Tomorrow, everything would change, for both of us. The night before the merger event, I couldn't sit still. The silver box sat on my kitchen table, gleaming under the dim light. It looked harmless, like any other delivery package. But I knew what it really was, a weapon built from truth. I kept pacing, sipping cold coffee, trying not to imagine the disaster I was about to cause. Jay called, checking in. Everything's ready. The code's solid. You just have to deliver it. His calm voice helped, but my thoughts spun in circles. Was I really ready to destroy my brother's empire? Would Mom even want this? I sat on the couch and stared at the box. Memories of Mom came flooding back, her gentle laugh, her late-night sketching code, her belief that integrity mattered more than fame. Then came the darker memories, Evan taking credit for her ideas, silencing me with his smirk. I picked up the box and whispered, "This isn't revenge. It's justice." But a small part of me wasn't sure that was true. Maybe I wanted him to feel the same humiliation I'd felt in his office. Maybe I wanted him to look at me, really look, and know he'd created his own downfall. As the clock ticked toward midnight, I looked out the window. The city lights flickered like restless stars. Somewhere downtown, Evan was probably rehearsing his speech about innovation and family values. I thought about his words again, worth nothing. They echoed like a drumbeat in my head. I smiled sadly and whispered, "Let's see what nothing can cost." Then I packed the box into a plain brown wrapper, set my alarm for dawn, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, everything would begin. The day of the launch was bright and loud. Cameras lined the stage and the lights made everything feel bigger than it was. I dressed in gray jeans and a simple shirt, hair tucked under a cap so no one would look twice. Jay met me at the door with a calm face that did not match the tremble in his hands. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. We walked through security like any vendor and I felt my heart beating in my throat. Backstage, workers moved like ants, cables snaking underfoot. Evan stood near the podium, perfect in a dark suit, smiling like a man who owned every truth in the world. He laughed with a partner and waved to the cameras, the same face that called me worthless not long ago. My stomach felt cold, but my mind was clear. I had rehearsed the moment in my head until the words slid into place. When the time came, I carried the brown package under my arm and walked up the aisle. People glanced at me but soon went back to their phones. I reached the stage, hands steady, and bowed slightly. A guard asked if I had permission. I said yes. I told them I had a special delivery for the CEO. They nodded and let me pass. Evan took the box from me with a curious look. The world seemed to slow down. The lights blazed and the cameras rolled. I smiled, the kind of small smile that holds a secret. "Enjoy," I said softly. He didn't look at my face. He only saw a package. He had no idea what was inside or what it would do. For a moment, I felt like a child hiding a surprise. Then I heard the announcer call Evan to center stage and the rest of the building held its breath. He opened the box with the practiced grace of someone who did not expect trouble. The seal came away and the lid lifted. Inside was the small silver drive wrapped in foam, simple and bright. He took it up and said a joke into the microphone about new tech and flashy demos. The audience laughed and the cameras panned. I watched every face in the room and felt the air tighten. Evan clicked to load his files. The screens behind him showed the company's logo and a slideshow. He spoke about innovation, about family, about legacy. He was smooth and polished and everything to the investors. I thought he was safe. Then the screens blinked. For one breath, nothing happened. He frowned and pressed another key. The live stream stuttered and a new window opened. My stomach dropped and my heart beat like a drum. On the big screen, the file list appeared. It started to play like a slideshow, but not of his speech. The old files, the original patent documents, scrolled in clear text. Margaret Hale Carter's handwriting filled the screens. Timestamps glowed in red. Emails popped up showing correspondence from years ago. The room fell silent except for a single cough. Evan stammered, trying to switch back, but the upload had started. Jay's code worked like a breath held until released. Investors in the front row leaned forward, faces pale. Cameras zoomed in on Evan's hand. He tried to laugh it off, to call it a glitch, but the truth moved across the screen and could not be stopped. My mouth was dry, but I swallowed and looked at him. His face lost color. The man who had stood on stages and told stories about humble beginnings now had the real beginning behind him, unrolled for everyone to see. I felt the weight of Mom's name fill the room and I breathed as if I had been waiting my whole life for air. Security rushed the stage. A man in a black suit moved like a breaker of storms and tried to drown the screens with a quiet command. Cameras kept rolling. People in the audience pulled out phones and lifted them like torches. Evan's voice dropped into a panic. "It's a fake file. It's a hack." He pointed to the screen as if the files were lies on a stage prop. But the documents were authentic. The files bore dates, and the handwriting matched Mom's notes. Lawyers near the front swallowed hard. One of them stood up fast and said, "We need to verify these with our legal team." The murmurs became louder and spread through the back rows until the whole room buzzed like a hive. I stayed on the edge of the stage and watched as the man who had called me worthless stuttered and dropped his smile. He stumbled through words that sounded closed and small. Someone from the tech crew rushed forward, fingers flying over keyboards. The cloud account showed access logs and the uploading activity matched the time the package had opened. The live stream kept the event in the hands of the world outside. I watched as faces changed from admiration to confusion. My hands were cold and my knees shook, but something inside me felt right. Justice did not always look like victory. Sometimes it looked like a pause, a break in a story where a truth could enter. I thought of Mom, and how she had sat at the table and balanced numbers like a tightrope. Her name, on those screens, was finally not hidden. Even with security shouting and Evan's lawyers whispering sharp words, I felt a soft peace move through me. The room had seen her again. I had given them back what had been taken. The fallout began like a fast wind. Videos of the launch swarmed the internet within minutes. News websites flashed headlines. Social feeds filled with 1,000 short clips of the screens revealing Mom's documents. People in my building sent messages asking if I was the woman from the video. Strangers called the office where I worked as a courier. They wanted to know who I was. My phone buzzed with hundreds of notes. Some were kind. Some were cruel, saying I had no right. But most were questions, and many were praise. Evan's face was on news platforms beside words like fraud and stolen patent. The company sent out a brief statement calling the event a technical breach and promising an investigation. Evan appeared on a live interview that evening with his tie loose and his hands shaking. He denied everything and called the files a hack. I watched him and felt nothing like triumph. Instead, I felt the tired hollow that comes after a long climb. People cheered me and people hated me. I had not wanted fame. I had wanted truth. The next day, emails arrived from journalists asking for my side. Investors called legal teams. Carter Dynamics stock dipped sharply, then fell farther as the day went on. I drank tea and tried to steady my hands while I answered a few messages. Jay kept sending short updates about the files, that the metadata was intact and that the legal timestamp showed Mom's authorship. He was careful and steady. I opened one of Mom's notebooks and traced a doodle she had made of a small parcel with a ribbon. In that drawing, she had written, "Good things delivered." I touched the paper and thought maybe that is what had happened. The world was loud now, but inside me a small quiet settled. The truth had traveled like a parcel, and it had landed where it needed to be. Within a week, the legal wheels turned fast. Carter Dynamics' internal team tried to contain the storm, but forensic experts confirmed Jay's findings. The files matched Mom's handwriting and the metadata showed the original timestamps. The law seemed to move more slowly than the news, but it began to catch up. Evan tried to file a suit against me for sabotage, claiming the package was malicious and that I had broken into the company systems. His lawyers painted me as reckless and dangerous. But the digital trail told a different story. The signature on the original patent, the emails between Mom and a small group of engineers, and the documents in her folder lined up like markers on a map. The court of public opinion had mostly decided, and the legal world started to look at the money Evan had made from the system. Meanwhile, I had to navigate interviews and polite questions from reporters. Many wanted my angry story, but I kept it simple. I told them about my mother and how she loved to make machines work better for people. I said I wanted her name restored. That was the truth and it felt clean to tell it. In the quiet hours I worked to rebuild the company that had been built on my mother's work. I thought of calling the new venture Parcel One Technologies, but the name felt large. I wanted something true. I found myself answering emails from former employees of Carter Dynamics who said Evan had taken credit and forgotten the people who helped him. They wanted to come back. I began drafting plans to hire the honest workers and build a company that cared about the people behind the code. The legal fights would take time, but something in the world had shifted. A woman who had been told she was worth nothing had become the keeper of a truth that mattered. It was a strange feeling to go to bed with a heart that was both heavy and oddly light. The deeper investigators looked, the more they found. Papers showed how cash had flowed from the company into private accounts and how some of the employee benefit funds had been used for fancy parties and loans. Old memos hinted that Evan had shifted money before investors had seen the true performance numbers. Each new line of proof cut a little deeper. He had built a life on borrowed names and stolen work. The public started to connect the dots. Protesters outside major offices called for audits and accountability. Investors who thought the company was a safe bet pulled back and asked for new audits. The merger partners that had been poised to sign a deal suddenly cooled off. One by one, they delayed the meeting dates. I watched as Evan's world grew smaller, not from one violent act but from the slow unraveling of truth. His wife filed for divorce, and pictures of his empty table at gala dinners appeared in the papers. Friends who had once toasted his success began to speak more quietly. It felt like a frost moving through an orchard, leaving bare branches where there had been fruit. I did not celebrate each collapse. I felt for the people who had been hurt by his choices, the employees whose pensions were at risk, the families who had trusted him. I started to work with a small legal team to help those who had been affected. We set up meetings and asked questions. I wanted to make sure the people who had been used were not forgotten in the rush to point fingers. My days filled with small tasks, answering emails, meeting with lawyers, and speaking with former employees who wanted to return. Each conversation reminded me why I had acted. This was not revenge. It was repair. News cameras filmed the sign on Carter Dynamics headquarters as workers removed letters and logos. The building looked like a stage set being dismantled, the name falling away like a mask. The city papers ran photos of auction notices and legal filings. For a while, I watched the coverage from a small office that Jay and I had rented. The space had one window and a bright, cheap desk. We painted a whiteboard with plans and maps of what needed to be fixed at the old company. People started to call the place Parcel One, and at first it was joking, but then the name stuck because we were delivering good changes. I hired a few engineers who had left when Evan had fired them for speaking up. They were kind and practical, and their hands knew the system like old friends. We began to rebuild, not to conquer markets but to make things that worked and that people could trust. I visited the building where Evan used to walk with his tie tight and tried not to feel triumph as the sign came down. Instead, I felt a quiet sadness for what had been lost in the name of pride. One afternoon, as we boxed up old equipment to send to smaller companies, a woman who had worked in HR hugged me. She said, "You give us back more than a job." I nodded and felt the weight of small victories. The legal fights continued, and the audits showed more holes in Evan's ledgers than we expected. People who worked nights to hide numbers now had to face their choices. The world kept watching and people kept talking. I tried to keep my head down and my hands busy, but sometimes I would stand by the window and think about how strange it was that a package could start a chain of changes that touched so many lives. When Evan first came to the office after the public fall, I saw him in the lobby, disheveled and shaken. His suit hung loose, as if the man who had worn it had shrunk. He looked older and tired in a way that made my heart ache a little. He pushed through security and found me sitting at a table, signing paperwork with a staff member. He stopped and watched for a long moment. I felt the anger rise, but I also felt something softer. He had been my brother. He had also been the cause of so much pain. He walked up and stood in front of me without saying anything for a long time. "You ruined me," he said finally, voice low. It was fatigue more than accusation. I put down the pen and looked at him. "You ruined yourself," I answered. "I only showed the world the truth." He laughed, but it was hollow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old locket, the one Mom used to wear. He held it out like an offering. "I kept this," he said. "I'm sorry." For a moment, the sight of the locket made my throat close. I took it and felt the cool metal. Inside was a faded photo of Mom smiling like she always had when she saw us together. I wanted to throw it away. I wanted to hold it tight. I did neither. We sat in silence for a while, two figures tethered by a wound that had not healed. He told me about the calls, the lawyers, the nights of endless questions. He said he had been wrong. I listened. I did not forgive him out loud. I did not embrace him. I considered giving him a job helping with the rebuild, a simple position where he could do small tasks and learn again to be humble. But the wound needed more than a job. It needed time. "You can earn a place here," I said slowly, "but you must start by telling the truth to the people you hurt." He nodded and left, the locket in my hand like an unfinished sentence. The courts were busy and patient. Evan filed suit after suit, fighting to keep his name and assets. He tried to claim the patents belonged to the company and not to Mom or me. He wanted the judge to see him as the builder and not the thief. But the evidence lined up like a neat row of bricks. Emails, prototypes, and old lab logs showed who had first written the code and who had spent nights testing it. When I went to court, I felt like a small boat in a big sea. The room smelled like old wood and papers. People looked at me with a mix of curiosity and pity. Evan sat across the room, his jacket a shadow. He stared like a man watching his own funeral. I sat firm and answered questions honestly. I told them about Mom and how she hummed when she worked. I told them how she taught me that people who make things beautiful deserve to be named. The judge listened with a quiet face, and the lawyers said their long lines. Sometimes the room felt cold, and I wrapped my coat tighter. Days went by in a blur of filings and testimonies. Then, after weeks, the judge called a verdict. He spoke in a steady voice and said the court found in my favor. The patents belonged to Mom and therefore to me. Evan's claims were dismissed. The room shifted like a tide. I felt relief wash over me so strong I thought I might cry in front of everyone. It was not gloating or vengeance. It was the end of the tangled story and the start of a new, quieter one. I left the court with a small folder and a heart that felt like it had been opened and cleaned. Even with the verdict, the recovery work was slow. We had to make sure rights were clear, employees' pensions were safe, and clients received apologies and new contracts. I set up a small team to handle the transition. We wrote letters to partners and offered audits to make sure nothing else had been hidden. Some partners agreed and returned. Others stayed away, scared by the headlines and the stain of scandal. I understood that fear. Rebuilding trust takes longer than rebuilding systems. I started to meet with former employees individually, people who had been forced out by Evan or who had left in disgust. They told me stories about him, small cruelties that stacked up over time. They told me about the nights they worked to fix errors he had ignored and about the people he laughed at when they asked for help. I listened and wrote down every detail. We set up a support fund to help those whose pensions had been damaged while the audits sorted the numbers. It felt right to give back not only because it was fair but because Mom had always cared for people who needed a hand. I also looked at the people who had shown kindness to me during the fight. I hired a receptionist who had brought me soup the day after the launch. I promoted a young engineer who had stood up when Evan tried to hide a mistake. Little by little, good choices built a new culture in the company. People came back because the place felt honest and warm again. They told friends and neighbors. Clients who saw the effort returned. The company grew slowly, but with roots that could hold. When the final legal papers arrived and the judge's decision became part of the public record, a quiet settled over everything. I remember sitting at my desk with a cup of tea and thinking about how strange it was to feel calm after such a storm. The press called it a landmark case about patents and family theft, and some of my friends called it courage. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who had kept a promise. The company's name changed, but not in a way that shouted. We chose a name that honored Mom without making a spectacle. Parcel One Technologies became the new face of the tools she had built. We made a small ceremony and invited the people who had helped. Evan watched from a distance and did not come. He sent a brief note saying he understood and asked for forgiveness. I read it and tucked it into a drawer. The staff gathered around a small cake and we toasted quietly. I thought about the judge's words that had mattered most, that truth had a way of coming back. I also thought about how fragile the reputation of a person can be, how a story told for years can be changed by what one person does to claim another's work. I promised myself to guard the new company carefully, to make sure that credit was given where it was due. I wrote a short line in the company policy: all creators will be acknowledged. It felt small but important. When people left that day, they were smiling more than they had in months. The building felt lighter. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside we had changed the shape of how we worked together. Even with the work done, there were pockets of sadness that did not go away. I thought often of Mom's quiet laugh and of how she made small things hum. I kept some of her old notebooks in a wooden box and read them by the light of my desk. Sometimes I would trace her handwriting and imagine her sitting across from me, telling me to be patient. It felt strange to have justice and still feel a hole. People told me I should celebrate, buy something big, or take a vacation. Instead, I visited places Mom had loved. I sat in a small park bench where she used to go on Saturdays and fed birds. It was simple and small and felt like a prayer. The company was getting back on its feet and the fund for the employees started to pay bills and rebuild savings. Families wrote letters thanking us. The small joys warmed me in ways money could not. One day, a package arrived at my office with no return address. It was plain and unmarked, and when I opened it I found a small wooden locket and a short note with shaky handwriting. The note said, "For being brave." It did not say who had sent it. I held the locket and thought of all the hands that had helped me. The life I had before seemed far away, but it had taught me how to be kind. I knew I would always miss Mom. I also knew that I had done what she would have wanted. I had given back her name and her work to the people who needed it. The city felt quieter, not because the noise had stopped but because my place in it had settled into something steadier. A few weeks later, I found an envelope on my desk. The handwriting was familiar and shaky. It was from Evan. My chest tightened as I slid it open. Inside was a simple note: I finally understand the cost of pride. You are worth everything I had. The words were small and honest and made my eyes sting. He had also included Mom's old locket, the one she had worn in photos when she smiled. I held it in my palm and felt a mixture of anger and softness. He had kept it all those years and had not shown it. He had taken, hidden, and then been bearable only when the truth forced him into light. I thought about standing outside his office years ago, feeling tiny. Now he was the one asking for something small and precious. I could have thrown the note away. I could have burned it in front of him. But I put the locket on my chain and felt Mom's memory press against my heart. I wrote back a short line: I forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting. You must make amends. He wrote me long letters after that, apologies and small stories, and sometimes he came by the office to volunteer. It felt strange and right to give him small tasks. He worked quietly, sweeping the floors and fixing broken cables, listening when people spoke. He did not ask for more than he was given. Over time, his hard edges seemed to soften. He was not the man he had been. He was a small, tired brother learning what it means to be honest. Months moved like gentle waves. Parcel One Technologies began to grow in a new way. We focused on helping small businesses and created affordable delivery systems. I sat in meetings with engineers and designers, and we debated small choices about how the system should work for people, not just for profit. We built a simple app that allowed customers to track parcels in a friendly way and to tip drivers fairly. We started community programs that provided training for young people who wanted to learn coding or basic repair work. I watched former employees laugh again and families breathe easier. The company's reputation improved slowly, but it felt earned. I also found joy in small parts of life: cooking a meal without thinking of the past, making a cup of tea that did not taste of worry, and writing notes to the engineers who did good work. Evan kept volunteering and slowly found ways to help without taking center stage. He mowed the small lawn outside the office and repaired a rickety fence at the shelter we supported. He learned to listen. One afternoon, a young woman from the shelter came in with a trembling voice and asked for help to get a job. I remembered Mom's hands and how they smoothed paper and fixed machines. I handed the woman a small package with a simple note inside: everyone deserves a start. We set up a program at the company that trained people from shelters and helped them find work. The world still had sharp edges, but I found that small acts of kindness could change a life. My days were busy and sometimes messy, but the mess felt honest. Sometimes old memories crept up like small storms. I would wake at night remembering the smell of hospital rooms and the silence that had lived in our house after Mom stopped talking as much. Those nights I would take out one of her notebooks and read until sleep came. I kept thinking about how many people do the work that others take credit for, and how quiet that work can be. We made a small wall in the office with photos of the team and little notes about what people had done. On the corner I pinned Mom's old drawing of a parcel with a ribbon. Staff would stop and read and smile. They told stories of the first time they saw her notes and how her careful lines made complex ideas seem friendly. It felt good to honor someone who had been ignored. I also had to handle the hard things: phone calls from lawyers who wanted more documents, meetings about restoring pensions, and the occasional angry voice that thought I had gone too far. I tried to meet each person with calm and honesty. There were days I felt tired and wanted to give up. Then a child would come to the office with their parent and draw a picture of a truck, or a young engineer would bring me a small gift of a fixed machine part he had polished. Those small moments were like light through a cloud. I learned to accept that justice is messy and slow but worth working for. I kept Mom's locket safe and wore it on days I needed courage. One slow afternoon, an old teacher of mine emailed to say he had seen the story on the news and that he was proud. He remembered the quiet girl who used to ask too many questions in class. I smiled and wrote back. People I had known years ago started to reach out with notes of thanks. A local paper asked to feature the small programs we ran with the shelter. I agreed and suddenly found myself answering questions about leadership and kindness. I told the reporter that Mom had taught me how to listen and to notice small things. "Why did you do it?" the reporter asked. I thought for a moment and said, "Because someone once said I was worth nothing." I wanted to prove that words can be wrong. The article ran and people sent messages, some were short and sweet, others long and messy. It felt strange to be seen, but I wanted to use that attention for good. We launched a scholarship in Mom's name for young people who wanted to learn engineering and who needed help with school costs. The first recipient was a bright girl named Mara who had taught herself to code on a broken laptop. She came to the office and I watched her eyes light up at the machines. I gave her a small book of Mom's notes and a ribbon parcel with tools. She cried and hugged me and I felt the circle of kindness keep turning. Small acts held power. As time passed, Evan's presence in the building became a calm thing. He learned to cook simple meals for the staff sometimes and to listen when people needed to talk. He came to the memorial we had at the office for Mom and stood quietly at the back. He did not speak to me for a while after that. Then one evening he knocked on my door with a small box of cookies. "I'm learning to bake," he said, smiling in a new, small way. I invited him in and we ate and talked about ordinary things. He told me about how empty the house felt and how he regretted the nights he had chosen profit over family. He did not ask for forgiveness directly. He knew it would take time. Over months he began to find a place where he could be helpful without taking over. He taught a small class at the shelter on how to balance numbers honestly. He spoke about mistakes and how to fix them. Watching him change was strange and gentle. People started to accept him slowly because he worked quietly and did not expect praise. One day he asked if I would let him help run a small community project. I agreed. Together we launched a free repair clinic where people could bring broken items and learn how to fix them. Evan showed up early, hands steady, and taught with a patient smile. I watched him handle a little radio and remembered how he used to play with toys as a child. This felt like the right kind of work for him now, humble and useful. The company's growth slowed into a comfortable speed. We did not chase the biggest contracts anymore. Instead, we worked to build systems that treated workers well and made delivery fair. Our small team became a family of sorts, and the shelter programs helped people find steady work and a path forward. The community started to use our services because they trusted us. When clients called and asked about our values, I would speak plainly about honesty and credit. People appreciated the clarity. We also made a small museum wall with Mom's original notes and photos. Visitors would come and learn about the early days of the prototype and how one woman's careful hands had made a better system. Young people would stand and read and then look at a box of tools and smile. I often walked the office at lunch and sat with engineers and asked about their ideas. I learned to listen better than to speak. Sometimes I would think about the day I had stood in Evan's office with a bag of food. The memory of that humiliation had turned into a long pathway that led to a better place. I did not always feel proud of the hard parts, of the times I had been angry or brave in ways that were sharp. But then I would see someone learn a new skill and I would feel that all the hard choices had a purpose. The world is full of mistakes and chances to fix them. A year after the launch, Parcel One Technologies held a small anniversary gathering. We invited the people who had worked in the first months, the families of employees, and the young trainees from the shelter program. The office smelled of coffee and warm bread. I stood at the doorway and watched people talk and laugh. Some faces were new and bright, others were older and lined with hard work. We had a small table with a scrapbook full of moments from the year, photos of the repair clinic, notes from grateful families, and small drawings from children who loved trucks. Evan came in quietly and stood near the back. He did not seek attention. He helped set tables and clear dishes and smiled when someone told a story of learning to fix a bike. I walked up to him and we stood together for a while, watching the room. "You did good," he said softly. I looked at him and felt the weight of time. I knew he meant it. "We did," I answered. The night felt like a soft ribbon tied around a present. People spoke about small changes they wanted to try in the next year: more apprenticeships, better healthcare for drivers, and a mobile class for repair skills. I listened and made notes. When the evening ended and the lights went down, I walked home under a sky that felt open and long. I held Mom's locket and thought of how one small package had started so many things. I felt tired but happy. The years after that moved like a steady river. Parcel One Technologies grew slowly and wisely. We opened a small training center in a neighboring town and gave tools and classes to people who needed a start. The company became known for fairness, and interviews often used our name as an example of responsible business. I was asked to speak at a small conference about ethics in technology. I said that giving credit is a form of kindness and that people who build things deserve to be known. The crowd listened and I felt my voice steady. Evan ran the repair clinic and taught people to fix things with care. He often told students about the mistakes he had made and how he had learned to be honest. He did not speak about his past much, but the students learned from his example. I married a quiet man who loved to read and who made a small garden that I tended on weekends. He asked no questions about the past and held my hand when I felt tired. Life had small joys: Sunday walks, a meal with friends, and long talks about what to build next. The company gave grants to small inventors, and we set a rule: every inventor would be credited and paid fairly. We knew how much damage terrible choices could do, and we wanted to set a new standard. I kept a careful list of names to honor at the little museum in the office. Each name was a reminder of someone who had helped bring the idea alive. One day, a letter arrived from a university offering a small scholarship in Mom's name. They wanted to teach a class about practical design with funds we had provided. The letter made my chest warm and my eyes wet. I wrote back that I would be honored and asked that the first class include stories about makers who were often forgotten. The day the class started, I went to watch. Young students sat in a bright room and listened to lessons about drawing ideas and making them real. They handled small machines and measured parts with careful hands. I sat at the back and watched, and somewhere inside me a small bell rang. I thought of Mom in that room, teaching quietly and smiling. The world felt like it had turned enough to make peace. I also went to visit the shelter often and taught a short class on confidence and small steps. People would come and show me their repairs and their new resumes. I felt proud and small all at once. The city around us changed, but something stayed the same: the sun still rose and children still chased pigeons. I walked with Evan sometimes to the little shop where we bought bread, and we would talk about small inventions we thought up. He had stopped telling big stories and had become steady. The locket of Mom's hung from my neck like a small map to the past. There were quiet moments when I would stand at the window and think of the long path. I thought of how words have power and how a single cruel sentence can change a life. I also thought of how truth, even when slow, finds a way to come back. The people who had helped me along the way, Jay, the engineers, and those who left notes, lived in the small corners of memory that kept me warm. I visited Evan at his small apartment sometimes, and we would cook together, clumsily cutting vegetables and laughing when things burned. We spoke about Mom and about how we would tell stories to remember her right. Once I went to the old house where she had once sat and drew for hours. The walls were quiet and a little ivy had grown around the porch. I left a small note on the table that said, "Thank you." That felt like finishing a circle. The company had started to give back in other ways as well. We sponsored a small community garden and held weekend markets where small inventors could sell their things. It felt like a soft net that caught people when they needed a start. I watched a young woman sell a small wooden toy she had made, and I thought of Mom's careful hands. She smiled and put the money in her pocket, proud and steady. Now, when I walk through the office and see people working and laughing, I feel a calm I did not have before. I remember the day I stood in Evan's office holding a bag of food and the burning shame that came with it. That shame changed into a long work of repair and care. People call me the woman who delivered a package that cost a CEO everything, but I think of it differently. I think of it as a delivery of a name, of a right, and of a promise kept. Evan and I have a quiet understanding now. We do not speak of the worst days often, but we do speak of small lessons and small joys. Once, a young girl from the shelter came up to me with a tiny, wobbly robot she had made. Her eyes shone and she handed it to me like a gift. I took it and felt the whole story fold into that small moment. I smiled and held the robot and thought of Mom's neat drawings and the way she would say, "Good things delivered." I had wanted to prove that words could be wrong. I had done that, but I had gained something more, a life built on small, honest work and people who were named and counted. The locket warmed against my chest. I knew that my brother had lost many things, but he had also found a small road back. We did not return to the way things were, but we made a new way forward. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. The city moved on, but here, in our small office, a package had been opened and the truth had settled like light across a room.